Alright, so let's get to what's probably going to be the first movie this year that kind of breaks my heart. And not necessarily because of the quality, but because of the fact that if there was one movie that was going to make me like really miss theaters, it would probably be this one. And it kind of crossed my mind. It was like, with this particular case, I mean, this is something that is like so massive and so huge. Maybe I can possibly just wait until I can hopefully get to a theater to see this as big as possible. But then as it kept going, leading up to it, it was like, well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to withstand that wait, and also with everything, going to streaming now, everything is being put, like, everything's like being taken into clips and being put on YouTube, and everybody's just trying to show everything. I think, like, this hadn't even been on HBO Max for 24 hours, and the final fight was on YouTube with like over 1 million views already. And so with that kind of shit, it's like I'll just do it, and hopefully to God, I will at some point get the opportunity to see it theatrically, even if I already know how it all plays out by then, because I saw it on a significantly smaller screen, with not as great sound, decent sound, but not theater sound by any means. So yeah, so that was kind of it just kind of felt like I felt genuinely like bummed out as I started it, because I was like, this just isn't the way. I know it isn't, but it's like with everything else going on in the context, and like I said, everybody is going to be talking about every little thing, and you won't be able to go on YouTube without seeing spoilers and thumbnails or anything like that. It's like, we just gotta fucking do it, I guess. I am kind of surprised how much of an impact there still is, um, when it, as far as seeing it on a significantly smaller screen. But I will say that I was kind of concerned at the start, because I guess before we go into this, it's worth noting that I I do like a lot the first Godzilla movie in this sort of established universe, the one that Gareth Edwards did. And I also really liked King of the Monsters from a couple of years ago. If it maybe possibly suffers when it's not in a theater, like you kind of get, because everybody complained about the human characters, like they do in all of these. Um, those were a bit more apparent when you're kind of watching it at home. But it's not gonna, King of the Monsters is gonna be something that kind of always suffers when you're not in a theater, I think. But I still like it fine, especially for like what it is, and seeing all the monsters clashing. This will never get old, so there's that. I think I've made it clear in a few videos now. I love Skull Island. Like, it's like I was talking to a friend about it recently, and it kind of occurred to me, Skull Island might be one of my favorite movies of the last few years. I've watched it so many times now. It just kind of snuck up on me, and it's like I almost underestimated how much I love that movie, and I came out of the theater loving that movie. So really, based on that alone, I guess you could say, based on quality of movies alone, I went into this kind of like Team Kong, I guess you could say, which I know isn't really the popular group, but it's, yeah, as far as the quality of the movies, that was what was giving me hope, was to see the God and Kong Skull Island again, and some of that just kind of general feel that they had. They also had human characters that weren't near as like wasted as the ones in the Godzilla movies, but I still think it's so. Just even talking about complaints about the human characters in these movies is just so tired at this point. I feel like it's just redundant to even bring that up. But so yeah, going into this, that's how I was feeling about the three previous movies. And the thing about Skull Island that also really stood out was just how vicious it is. Like, it is so brutal, in this really amazing way that's unexpected for like those big PG-13 blockbusters or whatever. So when I saw the opening scene of Godzilla versus Kong, I kind of started to wonder. It's like, did is the wrong thing uploaded here? Because it's like, because the whole thing where like there's people that tried to play Tom and Jerry, got the Snyder cut of Justice League by accident. So it's like, is this some sort of other mistake? Because the opening scene is, of course, Kong, which, of course, was very exciting. And then it looked like the start of a comedy or something. it kind of, it had like, it was basically, I guess, the Shrek opening, where he's like scratching himself and bathing, and I was genuinely concerned for a second. I was like, I mean, obviously it's the right thing. This is obviously Kong, and this is obviously Skull Island, but it, it seriously felt like, is this the wrong movie though? Like, what is this? Um, and then, of course, it's revealed that he's in, like, containment, and Rebecca Hall's here, and Alexander Skarsgård is here. We've got these new characters on the Kong side, and then we've got the characters we met before on the Godzilla side with Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown. But now we're adding, like, Brian Tyree Henry and Julian Dennison and all that. And I could just hear, like, so many hearts sinking when I saw it, because it's like, not only are we getting some of the new characters, but we're like, these characters are carrying over, and it's just all, we just keep adding them, and so we've got all these different stories going on with all the human characters, while we're just trying to figure out how it's going to build to this fight. So, and we've also got new villains with Damon Bashir and his daughter, doing this really sinister seeming top secret project, and I'm guessing that portion. I have no idea, like, because I avoid advertisements and trailers now. I have no idea what people know about this and what they don't. But what's also great about that is there'll be stuff that probably hits me more watching it than it probably did other people, with the whole not having seen it in any other context about the movie itself, which is great. But yeah, I also have no idea what people go into this knowing and what they don't, because there is one whole thing in the middle regarding a certain location. I don't know if that's in advertising or not. I do, like, I guess I'm gonna treat it like a spoiler just in case, despite the fact that if you watch the end credits of King of the Monsters, you see this location in print in big letters multiple times. So I would like to think people knew that they were getting that. And the same thing also with King of the Monsters' post credit scene with Charles Dance. And there's something here that, in this movie, that I imagine is being considered a massive spoiler, which is kind of funny, because as soon as I saw that post credit scene with Charles Dance in the theater, the person behind me just immediately said where that was going. like what that was going to be. And they were obviously correct. So, like I said, I have no idea what people know and what they don't know. So I guess I will, jump around some things, but you'll probably get the idea. Especially, most people probably having already seen it anyway by the time you would see something like this. But yeah, obviously, people will complain about there being a lot of human characters, stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, don't we already know by now that just is going to come with the territory? Like, there's really not much of a way around it, I guess. Like, the only thing I can think of is if you wanted to do something like this, but have, like, no human characters whatsoever, or very little, you would almost have to make, like, it in some prehistoric setting. And it's like, that seems like it's impossible, but then it's like, I guess if you look at, like, the opening scenes of something like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, you can maybe possibly see how an entire movie could be pulled off that way. But yeah, as far as these go, and just the general formula of these, you're gonna have to deal with the human characters. I guess it's just a matter of how those things are handled, and how much they are utilized. Which, yeah, is a lot, but it's never really bothered me that much. It certainly doesn't seem to have bothered me as much as it does other people, but yeah, because at the same time, they seem to at least get, like, really great cast that would, in any other context, would be this amazing cast list of actors, but the trouble is here they're just going to be either exposition machines or useless, or sometimes both. And we do have some additions here, like Brian Tyree Henry, for instance, where he is, he's clearly the comedy relief. It seems like with him and Julian Dennison, we're kind of getting two comedy relief characters in the same parts of the movie, which feels a bit much. But it's like, you could maybe possibly cut Julian Dennison out of the movie entirely, and it might not much might be different. And as far as Brian Tyree Henry goes as far as being comedy relief, I do think it's an interesting choice to see him in this kind of part because of the way he's played it before. Like he's like obviously there's Atlanta, but it's like his strength with Atlanta is he's like very sort of straight faced while the absurdity happens around him, which makes it funny. But then there's stuff like when he was in the new Child's Play, where he had some funny lines. Like he wasn't a comedic character necessarily, but he had comedic moments and lines here and there. And so to see him kind of, it's almost been like a stepping stone up to this point to see him just go full comedy, which in this is not the context I would have expected for that to happen to him, but here we are. And it's I can like I said I can see the character being annoying just because there's already enough comedic sideline stuff going on anyway. But I wasn't like annoyed with the whole thing or anything. And he has an interesting sort of thing going on where he's like doing the whole. I mean, he is basically like the conspiracy theorist that may or may not know stuff, and it's like it seems like an interesting character to throw into this kind of story, but at the same time, I was getting serious flashbacks of Woody Harrelson in 2012. It's might as well be the same thing. He's just kind of more of an insider rather than being like out in the woods somewhere. And yeah, as far as the carryover characters like Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler, they're just kind of she's basically just kind of doing the same thing she was in the other movie, and Kyle Chandler's only here for like a couple of scenes. He's just there to establish that he's Millie Bobby Brown's connection, I guess, to information or whatever. Basically, like she was in the other one, so there's that. And there's like one or two Vera Farmiga callbacks that are basically just there to convince Brian Tyree Henry, oh yeah, she's who she says she is, so let's do this whole side thing that's going to eventually just lead to one thing. But really, what it comes down to when you look at it that way is that these characters are basically our tour guide to get us from point A to point B. It's like when you really look at it, it's like you kind of want, because I said you can cut Julian Dennison out entirely. I guess you could, if you want to say that about the rest of them, you probably wouldn't be faulted by anybody. But it's so yeah. So I imagine that's going to bother a lot of people, especially since the runtime isn't really that extensive, which I actually kind of like because there are times when it feels like when we get blockbusters that are like really drawn out. In a lot of cases, it's clear that they don't need to be. And so the action scenes don't get completely dragged. Because I know a lot of people are going to complain, with a less than 2 hour runtime, why do we have all these human characters being our tour guide and not more of the fighting and all that? And people are probably thinking that the fight scenes are too short because of this. I found something kind of effective about how much there was. Because when you see, like, 5 Transformers movies that are 3 hours each and all that kind of shit. Much as I love them, even I guess you could say some of the action scenes in King of the Monsters, feel very like it's almost refreshing to see them sort of cut down just because when they're that big and that long, they can kind of start to lose their luster a little bit because it kind of gets to be redundant and you're kind of get it starts to dry up, and it's just sort of things are just happening to no impact whatsoever on the screen. They're just big and loud, and you don't really feel anything about it after a while. You just become numb to it. So I like that there isn't none of the action scenes in this are drawn out that long. So it's like you never have time to grow numb to it. Like every single moment of the big fight scenes has an impact, and they never really lose you. And then they're over just soon enough to leave you wanting more, but still feeling really satisfied at the same time. So I don't really have too much of a problem with how maybe seemingly cut down the action scenes are compared to other giant movies or whatever. But it's also the way these action scenes are handled. Because obviously we've got the 2014 Godzilla, which is basically like sitting in a dark room. I kind of get it from the perspective of seeing it, like it kind of building up to it more and more. Where it's like, at first they're not showing any of the action at all, then they're showing it, but you can't really see it, and then you can see it just enough for the peak moments of it. And then Skull Island comes along, and Kong shows up in the opening scene, and is already doing his thing. But then you go back to King of the Monsters, and there's a lot of close-ups. It's really dark again, but you can see more than you could in the first Godzilla movie of this universe. So going into this, it was kind of like, can we get action scenes that are closer to what Kong had? Where it's like most of them were during the day, and they were at just enough of a distance to where you could kind of see everything. There wasn't a lot of like ridiculous, close-ups or any of that. And it's like the only close-ups that come in are when they're not fighting, so you can get a really good look at them. It's like you would think they would have figured this out by now, but it took them, 2 or 4 movies or whatever. But yeah. So in this first fight scene, when we get this shot from below of Godzilla and we're looking up at him, what's really interesting is I don't know how many people realize that vertigo works in both ways. Where like not only can you not look down, but you also can't look up at high things. Um, in this shot, on my small, totally not a theater screen, um, we get this shot looking up at Godzilla from below, and my vertigo kicked in. Like that's how massive he looks. Um, and like I said, to have that even at home means that obviously everything looks as massive as it should. And like I said, this first fight is also during it starts off kind of underwater, and I was and I was kind of irritated because it's like, oh, is this your stand-in for darkness because it's a day scene? But no, they come out of the water, and then there's this whole great big thing that first time when Kong just punches him in the face, and it's like we get such a good, clear, just distant enough look at it that we can take the whole imagery in. It's like that's kind of what we've always been looking for in these. Like I said, I guess it just took a while. Um, and that's pretty much how the action scenes look throughout, which is great. So, as far as the movie looking great as well, we were talking about this specific location that I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. And the whole thing where this might seem like hyperbolic or something, but and I think it also has to do with the fact that I, saw trailers for this movie from back in the day, and I didn't see any trailers for Godzilla vs. Kong. But when I saw this particular place in Godzilla vs. Kong, I kind of felt like the first time I saw what Avatar was doing. I said, I know that seems like a big kind of statement, and it's like, and it's not, and Godzilla vs. Kong probably isn't to that degree by any means, but I felt like I had similar feelings looking at just how incredible this whole place looked and how the effects are practically flawless. Um, and it's like, because it's admirable enough how good Godzilla and Kong look. But to see an entire location that is just an entirely one big effect, and it looks genuinely like real, it's like they're really like, obviously I have praised extensively the effects in Skull Island and King of the Monsters for that matter, but this just feels like they just keep taking it up, like level after level, and they're just getting better, and even when it looks like that the effects could not possibly be any better than they were the previous time, they still manage to keep bettering themselves and one-upping themselves and what they can do with effects and how good they can actually look. And you deal with so much shitty CGI and so much that looks fake and looks like green screens, that it's so pleasing to see effects that are this good. And it's great. So, we also get some stuff in this territory that's not really stuff that we need or stuff that's really going in directions that are necessary. Like, we get not necessarily a backstory on Kong, but Kong's like ancestry, and that goes in a direction that I'm not entirely sure about. But it's all and yeah, there are times where it just kind of feels like we're getting filler until we get to our big fights. But in between, we do have we were talking about all the human characters with on the Godzilla side, and I said we kind of have another group to balance that out with Rebecca Hall and Alexander Skarsgård. There is another character that brings back kind of the classic thing we know Kong for, to where it's like he's, he's big and destructive and all that, but he's also like, there can just be one human person that he has like a soft spot for. It's just like the classic Kong thing. In this particular case, it's a deaf girl that's been adopted by Rebecca Hall. And this is where you can actually find, like, because obviously when you complain about the human characters, it's like that's the movie, that's the screenwriters, I guess, trying to have some sort of heart, but it's just kind of not there. But I think they finally found that here with this character, where we kind of see Kong have a connection with somebody, and it sort of kind of humanizes him in that way that we've seen, where like when he dies in the original movies, it's like a big tragedy. And the movie ends on that somber note. And it's like being able to find that heart that those had, even when he's in this, big movie where he's brawling with Godzilla, which should be, as over the top and campy as possible, that they were able to inject like that sort of kind of heart into it is, I guess, an accomplishment when you look at the way the character's been written before. Um, yeah, and as far as it being like, are you Team Godzilla, or are you Team Kong, or whatever, um, there was the whole thing about how Adam Wingard, the director, had said that there would be a definitive winner, but we kind of know, what that means, where it's like it's, I mean, I guess this would be considered spoilery, but I mean, is anybody going to go into this movie actually thinking one of them is going to kill the other? I mean, we've got a franchise they're trying to build. Obviously, that's not going to be the case, and there's also the case of when we see, the other Godzilla movies, we think Godzilla is going to be the threat, and then there's another threat that Godzilla is fending off. And then the same thing with in Skull Island. It's like at the start when he's just swatting helicopters out of the sky. We think that Kong is the big main threat until the skull crawlers happen. So there's always another threat that they're going to eventually save us from, when they might seem like the villain at first. So naturally, it's easy to see where this is going to go. But what I really love about the way they handled this was, it might seem like they're copping out in regards to whether there's a winner or not. But what's really interesting is that they do, and it's really fucking cheesy. And once again, with this kind of movie, maybe cheesy is what you're going for. But we actually do kind of have commentary on the sides, where like there's a moment where after the second fight, there's literally a moment where Alexander Skarsgård is looking on from above and says, "Oh, round two goes to," like he literally says that. So there is. So we are keeping track of who's winning this thing, but we all kind of know the inevitable direction it's going to go, where there's going to be a third threat, and then where that's going to go. But it's how incredibly that is handled. Like the entire last, half an hour or 20 minutes of this movie is so incredibly satisfying in so many ways. Like when it's that thing where you might go into the movie wishing that it's Godzilla versus Kong through the whole thing. Which, if you've seen any movie or any setup in your life, that's not going to be the case. And there will be moments throughout it where you're kind of like, I kind of keep forgetting this is supposed to be Godzilla versus Kong. They feel like they're pretty far apart right now. And we're dealing with so many other things that they're throwing at us in this less than 2 hour runtime. But it's more so that you're building to something. Like, you get a taste of it, and then you really, really get what the title promises in this really big way. And I know some people might think that the neon lights are kind of cheesy. Like, it's like if you want something to look cool, go with neon lights. But it was bringing back like Pacific Rim vibes in a really, really big way. And I found this whole thing incredibly satisfying. And like I said, the brutality of it is surprisingly there also. Like there is a point in time where Kong does something that I am pretty positive is a reference to something Mel Gibson does on Lethal Weapon. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of inspirations we're looking at, it seems. So Yeah, I would say the only thing that feels missing would be talking about that post credit scene of King of the Monsters. I feel like there is a very easy way to have Charles Dance's character from King of the Monsters in this movie, and he's just not in it. Like, I don't even know that he's referenced apart from what he did in that scene, that post credit scene of King of the Monsters. So I don't know if he's gonna be dealt with at any point, or if that's just gonna be an open end forever. But yeah, I don't know. So of course, I don't know what else they plan on doing with this, if anything. But I guess we'll see. But this, I did find this overall incredibly satisfying. Even if there are those moments where it's like, maybe this will bog it down for a little bit, but really anything that like maybe bogs it down or kind of becomes a dead portion of the movie in the middle or whatever is kind of stuff you would expect going in anyway. Like, it's not going to be a surprise that these things are there, like the human characters and stuff like that. So I got over it pretty quickly. But what it is that you're here for, um, it I'd almost say I guess I would say it exceeds expectations because with like the way we saw a lot of the fights filmed in like the other two Godzilla movies or whatever, my expectations were kind of and I mean I was extremely excited especially because I love Skull Island so much and I was excited to see Kong again and how they were going to handle him. Not to mention the two of them interacting, but I feel like my expectations were reasonable enough. So I would say when I went in like that, knowing that there would be, human characters doing stuff I don't really care about or whatever, or just getting exposition or whatever, going in expecting that probably did a lot. So, um, yeah, I find this extremely satisfying. And I'm extremely satisfying with how they handled which one comes out on top or whatever. So, yeah. It's one of those cases where everybody should be pleased, but not in like the cop out sense, where it's like they didn't want to piss off any fan bases. I think both sides will come out very satisfied. So that's what I took away from this. So I think the next thing we're gonna do is take a sharp left turn and talk about a couple of the Oscar movies and then go into another review video and then a versus, which is kind of bringing the Oscar movies back into it. So yeah, and then whatever's coming with that. So until the next thing, I think that's it.